10. The Amish Stud. In 2009, in Apple Creek, Ohio, Barbara Weaver's murder completely shocked the Amish community. This made the headlines because the Amish community believes in minimalist living and is against violence. Eli Weaver had created an online persona and referred to himself as Amish Stud. He would often indulge in cheesy interactions with women on his social media handle, like asking, "Who wants to do an Amish guy?" It was completely innocent until the tables turned. An intruder entered Weaver's home and shot his wife. When authorities arrived, they found the woman lying in a pool of blood with a gunshot wound in her chest. Weaver had a solid alibi. He was apparently out fishing with his friends, but the neighbors had a very different story to tell. They had seen Eli with a woman named Barb Raber. The two often exchanged texts about how they could get rid of his wife. This included a poisoned cupcake, an explosion, and detailed searches on carbon monoxide. Investigators found that there were 840 internet searches related to poisons. Eli was also okay with poisoning his 5 children and bluntly believed that they would go straight to heaven. Finally, they resorted to using a gun. On June 10, 2009, authorities arrested the pair and charged them with aggravated murder. But they never found the murder weapon, and Raber's prints were not in the house. Weaver cut a deal and is serving 15 years, while Raber is doing 23 to life. 9. Husband's affairs with a 73-year-old woman. A 25-year-old woman known as Summer A. and her husband, Imran Ayub, 31, would regularly drive to Wielsbecke municipality to visit Gretje, a 72-year-old Dutch woman. But this was no friendly visit for the man in question, because Imran had been having an affair with Gretje since he was 18 years old. Back then, Gretje was married to a wealthy Italian businessman who traveled abroad for his business. You could tell that this business was booming, as Ayub would enjoy lavish gifts for his sexual performance. Once, she gave him a white BMW X6. When Imran and Summer met, Summer assumed that the affair between her husband and Gretje was over. When the couple went over to Gretche's house, things became heated. Summer found out they were still having an affair. Summer told the court that the twisted couple turned on her, laughed at her, and called her fat. Ayub wanted her to accept their extramarital relationship. This infuriated Summer, and she took a gun that she found in the car and shot Gretche twice. Luckily for Gretche, she survived. Summer, however, faced 10 years in prison. 8. Mr. Smooth. Timothy Bremer, a married man, was having an affair with 41-year-old Claire Perry in Dorset. They were in a secret relationship for over 10 years. But as Bremer described in his car, one kerfuffle had killed Perry. The Court of Appeal charged Timothy with manslaughter, and they have sentenced him to jail for 13 and a half years. Mrs. Perry met Timothy outside the Horns Inn in West Parley to confront him about another of his extramarital affairs. Tired of all the lying, Perry had taken Bremer's phone and texted his wife saying, "I am cheating on you." Bremer, enraged at Perry's action, strangled her in his car, and his arm accidentally slipped in all the melee. Desperate to cover up the crime, he used a knife to hurt himself and claimed that Mrs. Perry stabbed him. Footage from a police body camera showed him covered in blood and crying a few minutes after he killed his victim. He was having an affair with Perry, but he even had one with Kate Rhodes, who mentioned in court that he used the grooming technique to exert coercive and controlling behavior over women. They labeled him a well-practiced liar who has been consistently dishonest and devious. The Court of Appeals rejected an attempt by Bremer's lawyers to have his jail term reduced. 7. Family affairs. On August 25, 2008, an intruder shot 59-year-old Philip Height and his son, Gary Height, at their home during the early morning hours. They also shot Carrie's mother, Linda Height, but she miraculously had enough energy to call the authorities. The intruder was dousing the house with gasoline, but after hearing Linda call 911, he fled. When the authorities took Robin, Carrie's wife, in for questioning, she admitted she had an affair with Craig Height, her brother-in-law, and the son of Philip and Linda. This caused a family fallout. News spread to the father-in-law, who wasn't too happy about it. After an argument with Robin, Carrie left their home to stay the night with his parents, Philip and Linda. When Robin informed Craig of the situation, he rushed to his parents' house to finish them off. He murdered Carrie and Philip that night, and Linda, who had a bullet brushed past her left cheek, narrowly escaped. No evidence placed Craig at the scene, yet he had no alibi, and they found he lied on a polygraph, even flat out denying his relationship with Robin. In 2011, the judge sentenced him to 2 life terms in prison plus 85 years for the murder of his father and brother. After they proved Robin's involvement, they sent her to jail, while they handed the 3 young kids over to the grandmother. The only thing Robin said was, "I had a secret," and once that secret had been exposed, all hell broke loose. 6. An affair to remember. An estate agent in Worcestershire, England, stabbed his wife to death in a drunken rage after his wife bragged about her lesbian affair. What might have instigated him further must have been that she even taunted him about the size of his manhood. 44-year-old Melanie and 49-year-old David had a great time on New Year's Eve with their friends on the last day of 2018. Sadly, they got into a heated argument when they returned home. The only way David could think of shutting her up was by stabbing her. Melanie didn't even defend herself. After committing the crime, he called 999 and informed the telephone operator that he had killed his wife. Unable to bear the guilt of what he had done, he even tried to kill himself. When the authorities arrived, David begged one officer to kill him. Mrs. Clark, who had 4 children from a previous relationship, had died just 12 minutes after New Year's. Her 2 sons, Sheldon, 22, and Slade, returned from the party and saw their stepdad arrested in blood-soaked pajamas. During a police interview, they found out that Melanie was having an affair with David's close friend's daughter, 31-year-old Kate Bastians. According to David, he only washed the blood off his hands when he got to the police station. Police arrested him on the first day of 2019, which also was his birthday. 5. The punishment. Yvonne Schmidt, 39, and Brigitte Koenig, 37, joined forces to kidnap 44-year-old Lothario Thomas and put him through a horrible ordeal. It was so bad that he is still undergoing therapy for it. So what did the women do, you ask? With the aid of 4 hired heavies, they kidnapped Thomas at a truck stop close to Berlin. Then they stripped him naked, bound him tight with tape, blindfolded him, tossed him in the back of a refrigerated van, and drove him into the woods. Then they beat him up brutally and abandoned him. He had to find his way back to the city stark naked in the chilling temperatures of the night. Lucky for him, he was able to hitch a ride. They treated him for severe injuries to the skull and stomach. On the first day of trial, ex-wife Schmidt admitted all the charges. She said that Thomas had abused her for 10 years during their marriage. She told the judge that the kidnapping was spur of the moment. She told the courtroom that he continued to abuse her even after splitting up, making her feel uneasy. The judge refused to believe Schmidt's testimony that she didn't know the men who assisted in the kidnapping. 4. Sandwiched. 50-year-old Bill Hall Jr. from San Antonio, Texas, married his childhood sweetheart Frances, 53, in 1984. Together, they built a successful trucking business. Things seemed perfect on the business front, but not so much at home. Then along came 28-year-old Bonnie Contreras, a former exotic dancer. She had smitten Bill, and he showered her with loads of gifts. This continued for 3 years. Bill then grew tired of her and started ignoring her calls. That's when Bonnie sent Francis a photograph of them having sex. Francis threw Bill out of the house and he went straight to Bonnie's. Francis saw Bill riding his Harley-Davidson the next day, with Bonnie tailing behind in the family's Range Rover. This enraged Francis, and she turned the car around and sped up behind them. Francis tried to get her husband's mistress to pull over, but Bonnie drove faster. According to Bonnie, Francis repeatedly slammed into the back bumper of her car. Francis denies this and claims that Bonnie kept recklessly braking in front of her. Bill got between the two vehicles and he lost control, tossing him off the bike and into the grass along the highway. A few hours later, he died from his injuries. They charged Francis for killing Bill because Bonnie was in front, and Francis was the one behind. The prosecutors used a text that Francis left for Bonnie during the chase that read, "Told you to watch your back." The judge was sympathetic and sentenced Francis to prison for 2 years. The trucking business has since filed for bankruptcy, and Bonnie continues to file lawsuits against Francis. 3. A double murder and suicide. Franz Dubois shot a Formula One boss and her lover after he found them cozying up in bed before ringing the police and turning the gun on himself. In August 2021, they found Nathalie Mallet, 51, and her lover, Anne-Laurence Duviot, 53, dead at Mallet's home in Gouvet, Belgium. They treated the case as a double murder and a suicide, but infidelity alone might not have been the motive. According to DH Sport, Mallet never hid her lesbian relationships from her husband, and she was open about it. Speculation started during the rounds when Mallet failed to turn up for the last day of the Ypres Rally event, a part of the World Rally Championship that was to take place the same day. While Mallet was the CEO of the Spa-Francorchamps F1 circuit in 2016, Dubois was also a team owner and co-founder of the VW Fun Cup series. The pair, married for 17 years, spent brief spells as race car drivers, with Mallet being more successful than Dubois. In a statement, the public prosecutor said, at 0010, the bodies of 2 women and 1 man were discovered by the police in a house in Gouvet, all 3 presenting gunshot wounds. According to our information, the male individual voluntarily used his firearm to kill both women, including his wife, before killing himself. 2. Daniel Barrett. 40-year-old Daniel Barrett has been found guilty of the first-degree murder of his wife, Mary Bradley Barrett. According to authorities, Barrett killed his wife in their home in Pennsylvania after Daniel accused Mary of having an affair. Wilkes-Barre Fox Wolf presented this information to the courts. While they were arguing, Daniel went into a jealous rage. He blacked out and punched Mary right in the face. After a while, he gained consciousness and saw what he had done to his wife. His wife was lying on the floor dead. He had a pair of fire tongs over his head. He first used tongs to beat her and then moved on to a fire poker. But before that, he used a knife to stab her repeatedly on her back. He dragged her body down to the basement and left it there to cover up for his crimes. He left the fire poker along with the body. 2 days later, Daniel couldn't hold his secret any longer, so he called the police to confess to the crime. Mary Bradley Barrett was an Air Force pilot that served the United States. She also had a teenage daughter. They sentenced Daniel to jail for life without parole. 1. AutoExile hired assassins to kill mistress and blackmailer. In 2020, they charged Eric Charles Mound, 46, of Austin, a partner in Mound Automotive Group, Gilad Paled, 47, of Austin, Brian Brockway, 46, of Austin, and Adam Carey, 30, of Richlands, North Carolina, with a kidnapping that resulted in death. According to court documents, Paled claims he is a former member of the Israel Defense Forces and was the owner of Spear Tip Security in Austin. Brockway and Carey were both identified as former active-duty U.S. Marines. Mound offered them $750,000 to execute the crime. Mound, a married man, planned to visit his mistress, Holly Williams, for his upcoming trip to Nashville. After his trip, he received a message from his mistress's boyfriend, William Lanway. William had threatened to expose Mound and Holly's relationship if he didn't meet his blackmail demands. Mound, scared that he would get exposed, got help from Peled, Brockway, and Carey, who were private investigators. He went to his bank and withdrew $15,000 the same day that the investigators prepared an intelligence report. Carey traveled to Nashville and reported his findings to Peled in a document titled Tennessee Set Rep. On March 11, 2020, Brockway and Carey confronted Williams and Lanway outside of Williams's apartment, and they shot Lanway multiple times, killing him instantly. They drove Holly and Lanway's body to a construction site and fatally shot Holly there. They then dumped the bodies at the construction site and deleted the printer account used for communication. Brockway returned his rented car just a couple of hours after the murders, and investigators confirmed a wire transfer of $750,000 to Peled's account from Mound. Nearly 21 months later, they arrested all four perpetrators. They charged them with conspiracy to commit kidnapping resulting in death, and carrying, brandishing, and discharging a firearm concerning a crime of violence.
Number 10. The Machete Killer. Carla Jacqueline Morales was 20 years old when she was charged with murder in 2018. According to the police, Carla was associated with the dangerous MS-13 gang. She didn't technically commit murder herself, but she did lure a man into the darkness where a group of gang members were waiting for him. Then they chopped him up with machetes. It was an absolutely horrendous crime, one that Carla still hasn't been brought to justice for. For some crazy reason, she was allowed to wander the streets after she participated in the execution, with nothing but a GPS ankle monitor to keep track of her. She managed to pay a $60,000 bond to get herself out of prison while awaiting trial. Well, she cut her GPS ankle monitor off just days before the trial was supposed to start. This was in early February of 2022, and last we heard she's still on the run somewhere in Texas. At first, the authorities in Harris County were hoping to capture Carla themselves. But it's taken so long, they've reached out to the public. They're now hoping someone can reveal her whereabouts. We know she has strong ties to gangs and that she was involved in the killing with 5 other members. We also know she goes by all kinds of nicknames, such as Cherry, Missy, and Foxy. Number 9. Trigger-happy bounty hunter. Elmer Leia was a 24-year-old Texan wanted for jumping bail in regard to a domestic assault case. His original arrest came after he beat up his fiancée and then tried to flee from the police with her and their 3-month-old child inside a car. He was arrested and released on bail on a $35,000 bond. Then he decided he didn't want to go to court, and so a bounty hunter whose name has not been released began the hunt. In October of 2021, he tracked Elmer to an apartment complex in Park Falls, Houston. The fugitive managed to get in his vehicle, but the bounty hunter blocked his pickup before he could get out the front gates of the development. And this was where everything spiraled out of control. The bounty hunter approached the pickup truck with his gun drawn. In response, Elmer hit the gas and tried to run over the bounty hunter. Allegedly scared for his life, he opened fire and started blasting through the windows. Bullets struck the fugitive, and he was dead on the spot. In the aftermath, the bounty hunter didn't get in any trouble for committing murder. The investigation is ongoing, but there do not appear to be any criminal charges being brought up against the man, who says he shot Elmer in self-defense. Number 8. The Waukesha Parade Tragedy. Darrell E. Brooks was out on bail when in November of 2022, he drove his SUV into a Wisconsin parade, injuring over 60 people and killing 6. The criminal and multi-murderer was a registered sex offender at the time in Nevada and had an active warrant for his arrest. And yet, despite an active warrant, he had been released from prison on bond after yet a different violent incident involving a vehicle. The previous one had him running over the mother of his own child. To put this as simply as possible, Darrell should absolutely not have been released for any amount of money. He was a dangerous man who ran over his baby mama at a gas station parking lot, then plowed his SUV into a crowded parade. After he was arrested and charged with 5 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, the judge gave him the option of posting bail yet again. The only difference is that this time, the bail was set at $5 million. Back at the beginning of November, when he first ran over his child's mother, his bail was only set at $1,000. Number 7. The Bale Scammer. Jean is a 71-year-old grandmother from Long Island who became the victim of a weird bail scam in 2022. Jean is not your typical senior citizen, though, and is actually a retired 911 operator. When she received a strange phone call from a man saying that he was her grandson and that he was in desperate need of bail money, she knew there was something fishy going on. Not only because all of her grandchildren are in middle school, but because she also got calls for 2 other men. One pretended to be the lawyer, and the other pretended to be the bail bondsman. Partly out of boredom and partly out of spite, she decided to play along and lure the scammers into a trap. And luckily for all of us at home, she filmed the whole thing on her doorbell camera. First, she agreed to hand over the $8,000 in cash the scammers were asking for in bail money. Secondly, she contacted the Nassau County Police Department. They agreed to help with the sting operation, especially seeing as Jean's status as an ex-911 operator. When a criminal came to pick up the cash on her doorstep, thinking he had easily duped an old lady, he was met by a police officer and arrested. The scammer was identified as Joshua Gomez and has since been charged with attempted grand larceny. It's a small victory, but one that must certainly feel good to everyone out there who's ever been the victim of a scam. Number 6. Woman on Fire. A Detroit man by the name of Devon Marsh set his pregnant girlfriend on fire in the beginning of 2022. Devon poured gasoline over his 6-month pregnant girlfriend, lit her on fire, and then watched as the flames consumed her. By the time the fire was finally put out, she had suffered burns over 60% of her body. She was hospitalized in critical condition. It was also unclear if the babies inside her, as it turned out she was actually pregnant with twins, would pull through. It's hard to imagine that this kind of thing still happens in America in the 21st century, yet here we are. But what has people really up in arms is the fact that Devon posted a bond of $5,000 and walked out of his Michigan jail cell just 2 days after the incident happened. He was released on bond with his only conditions being not returning to the scene of the crime or doing drugs. And according to the New York Post, he also has a long criminal record with all kinds of prior charges, from drugs to guns to assault. While the woman he almost burned to death is struggling to survive in the hospital, he's walking around the street as if nothing ever happened. Number 5. Trouble in Berlin. At 2:30 in the morning on Wednesday, April 2021, Berlin police contacted local cops in the city of Meriden to perform a welfare check on a woman living in the city. They made the request because they had just learned that a man named Colin McBriety had cut off his monitor bracelet. Colin was required to wear the monitoring device because of several violent incidents involving him and an unnamed female. This woman had been pestered by Colin so relentlessly that she had 6 protective orders taken out against him. And so, when they learned he cut off his bracelet, They were fairly certain the woman was in trouble, and they were correct. When Meriden officers arrived at her residence, they discovered a screen missing from one of the windows and heard a horrible crash from inside the home. They then saw a man stick his head out of an upstairs window. They tried to reason with the man to come outside, but he refused. At the same time this was happening, the woman in the house was on the phone with the police saying she feared for her life. Colin had broken into her home, but whatever he had planned was foiled by the police showing up. Realizing he was in major trouble, he barricaded himself in the laundry room and blocked the door with the dryer. It was pretty clear he had no way out, and so he did eventually let officers talk him out of the room. He was arrested and charged with home invasion and a whole heap of other crimes, as well as violation of his protection order. This time his bail was set at $250,000, and there was no way he could pay it. Number 4. 99 problems. Marco Parks is what you might call a habitual offender. He was sentenced by a Limestone County jury in December of 2021 to spend 99 years in a Texas prison. This was the result of bail jumping and failure to appear in court following a prior arrest in 2019. This original arrest came because he was caught operating a vehicle without a driver's license or insurance. He was also found with 9 grams of methamphetamine. He was supposed to stand trial for these crimes in June of 2021, but never showed up for court. He was charged with bail jumping and arrested 19 days later. Then, when he finally had his court date, the judge decided he was a habitual offender and gave him a prison sentence of no less than 25 years, but not more than 99 years. After a very brief deliberation, the jury decided to go with the full 99 years. The reason this is such an insane story is that all Marco did was try not to go to court, among his other minor crimes. There are people out there who murder other people and get less than half of what Marco got. He really should have shown up for court. Number 3. Bail bonds murder. Early 22 in El Cajon, a bounty hunter tracked a bail jumper to a vacant business. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the bail bond agents descended on the seemingly abandoned property. They believed the person who had skipped their bail was waiting there, but they ended up getting into a confrontation with a completely unassociated individual. It was sheer bad luck. This individual didn't know what was happening. He didn't like the look of the bail bond agents, and so he pulled out a gun and shot at them. One of the bounty hunters took a bullet straight to the face, while another agent shot the gunman with a taser to incapacitate him. Then they ran for their lives, dragging their wounded comrade with them. The bounty hunters called the cops established a perimeter around the building, and paramedics treated the man who'd been shot. Luckily for him, the bullet had gone through his cheek and exited out of his ear. It was pretty unlucky that he got shot, but almost miraculous that the bullet entered and exited without causing any major damage. The shooter came out of the building eventually and gave himself up. Then the San Diego bomb arson unit used a tactical robot to clear the rest of the building. It had been used by squatters, but there was no sign of the actual guy the bounty hunters had been tracking. Number 2. 3 arrests in 24 hours. Under normal situations, a police officer will use an arrest affidavit to state the circumstances surrounding the apprehension of a criminal. But in Denver of October of 2021, a police officer used an affidavit for something different. He used it to warn the court not to provide the defendant with the option of bail. The defendant in the case was Robert Avila, and he had been arrested 3 times in just 24 hours. And even though his charges weren't considered felonies for some asinine reason, officers did describe him as erratic, incoherent, and building up to something terrible. They understood his behavior was only getting worse, and that something really terrible could happen. His first arrest came on October 25th, around 10 p.m. Police were called because a resident at an apartment building said a man had kicked in his front door. Then the man had just kind of loitered in his apartment for no reason. Police arrested Avia and he was let out immediately on bond. 13 hours later, he did the same thing at the Marriott Hotel. He was arrested and released on bond. 9 hours after that, he broke into a woman's apartment and she locked herself in her bedroom in terror. When the police came to arrest him, he became violent and dragged a cop 30 feet, 9 meters down the hallway. Clearly, Robert Avia needs to be behind bars, and Denver Police Chief Paul Payson agreed. He said that he and his department are seeing too many cases just like this one. Individuals are involved in multiple crimes and simply let go on the streets with no repercussions. And although nobody got hurt this time, it could have been a lot worse. Avia had his bond set at $10,000, an amount he couldn't pay. And so finally, he got stuck in jail. Number 1. Bale Jumping Killer. Rosalie Cook was a grandmother of 6 and a well-respected member of the community. But on May 16, 2020, Rosalie became the victim of a tragically broken justice system. As she was walking to her car in the Walgreens parking lot near her home at just before 10 o'clock in the morning, she was assaulted. A man named Randy Lewis pushed the 80-year-old woman to the ground and then stabbed her to death. Police in the area arrived on scene momentarily. They shot Lewis dead in the parking lot when he charged at one of the officers with the very knife he used to murder Rosalie, a sweet old grandmother. That was the end of the case, but not the end for Rosalie's son. He has since gone national, trying to hold the criminal justice system accountable for what happened to his mother. The issue is that Randy Lewis had been arrested 67 times and was out walking the streets on personal recognizance. This is when a criminal is let go on a free bond, assuming they'll take care of themselves and not commit any crimes. Rosalie was only one of 156 people killed in Texas's Harris County since 2018 who were out on multiple bonds. This means they were arrested several times and let go. And this is only in one Texas county.
10. The Tik Tok Stalker. Ava Majory is 15 years old and already has more fame than most people can hope to attain in their entire lives. In 2021, Ava found herself the victim of an obsessed stalker who followed her TikTok videos religiously. He was so obsessed with the teenager that he moved past watching her videos and started physically following her. Then, in July of 2021, Ava's father said enough was enough. He pulled out a gun and shot the stalker to death. Of course, the father didn't go out of his way to track the stalker down through the streets like Liam Neeson. He shot the man when he showed up to their front door looking for his teenage daughter. The problem started when Ava began getting really famous really quickly. She only started making videos in 2020 at the age of 13. People liked her so much that by the time she turned 15, she had over 1 million followers. Most of these followers were acquired in the space of just 1 year, between 14 and 15, and all because of her dancing videos. And if you want to really know how creepy TikTok is, 75% of her followers are male, with most being full-grown adults. Her stalker started sending her messages, and so Ava thought she could get rid of him by charging $5 each for personal Snapchat photos. But that only made things worse. On July 10th, Eric Rohan Justin flew from Maryland to Florida with a shotgun and knocked on her front door. When Ava's father opened it, he shot him and killed him. Ava's father was never prosecuted because he was defending his property under the Stand Your Ground rules. As for Ava, she's still wildly famous on TikTok. 9. Obsessed with murder. In Portland, Oregon, a romance novelist who wrote books about how to kill your husband has been accused of actually going through with it herself. Her name is Nancy Crampton Brophy, 71 years old. She wrote a book literally called How to Murder Your Husband, and in 2022, she's standing trial for that very crime. Prosecutors say she fatally shot Daniel Brophy, whom she had been married to for 27 years, to collect his life insurance policy of $1.4 million. In other words, Nancy was so obsessed with the thought of murder, so seduced by her own whimsical writing, that she tried to become a character in her own book. Her husband's body was discovered in a kitchen at the Oregon Culinary Institute, where he taught back in June of 2018. He died by a single gunshot wound to his chest while prepping for his morning class. When asked where she had been, Nancy claimed she was at home during the murder. But by September, the police had put together a strong enough case to connect Nancy to the killing. They discovered that she was indeed at the crime scene that morning. Plus, the cops were suspicious, since she wrote a book about a woman who spent every waking moment of her marriage fantasizing about killing her husband. She'd driven herself to it, and had definitely thought she was clever enough to conceal the crime. 8. Spying turned deadly. TikTok star Ali Abulaban was so obsessed with his estranged wife that he threw his fame down the toilet for a life behind bars. It all started when his wife kicked him out of their San Diego apartment in October of 2021. He moved into a hotel on October 18th, then days later snuck back into the apartment while his wife was away. Ali secretly downloaded a listening device onto his daughter's iPad. This allowed him to listen in on what was going on at the apartment while he was sitting in his hotel room. It didn't take long for his obsession with his wife to spiral way out of control. He heard another man come into the apartment and speak with his wife. Ali was so furious that he immediately rushed to the apartment, shot the man talking to his wife 3 times, and then blasted his wife in the head execution style. Next, Ali, who at the time had roughly 1 million followers on TikTok, called his mother to confess his crime. Then he picked up his daughter from school with the murder weapon still in his pocket. While driving with his daughter, he called the police and admitted to the fatal shooting of his wife, Anna Abulaban, and her male friend, 29-year-old Cadenas Barron. As of right now, the TikTok star is still behind bars waiting to stand trial. Since he admitted to a double murder, chances are he's looking at life in prison. 7. Extreme catfishing. For almost 2 years, high school chemistry teacher Douglas Lay used pictures of an adult female film star to pose as a teenage girl under the fake name Ray Pelletier. The 25-year-old man did this as part of a really weird catfishing scheme that ended up with him being charged with 20 felonies. You see, Douglas was obsessed with male high school students. To trick them into forming inappropriate online relationships, he created this entire fake persona. According to the Santa Clara County District Attorney, he managed to snare 9 victims in his creepy scam. The scam started in June of 2014 and lasted all the way until April of 2016. During that time, he used Facebook Messenger to send explicit videos and photos of the female film star to students in several different high school areas. He was only busted because Facebook alerted the authorities of the inappropriate communications. Police looked into the claim and then raided Douglas's home in April and seized his hard drives and computers. He was arrested later that day while in the middle of teaching an honors chemistry class. He was putting cuffs right in front of his students. 6. The family gynecologist. Morgan Hellquist was the patient of Dr. Morris Wardman for 9 years. Dr. Morris had performed all the most intimate exams possible on Morgan, seeing as he was a New York gynecologist. But what Morgan didn't realize throughout their relationship was that the doctor had been obsessed with her mother in 1985. Her mum, Jo Ann Levy, had originally gone to Dr. Wardman for help getting pregnant. He assisted her by supposedly artificially inseminating her with the sperm of an anonymous donor. In reality, he'd used his own. He was so obsessed with Morgan's mum that he tricked her into having his baby. It wasn't until Morgan got a DNA test in 2016 that she learned about several siblings who'd also used the platform. And in 2021, the half-siblings came together to discover the horrifying truth. Dr. Wardman had fathered them all. It was absolutely devastating for Morgan, who realized that her gynecologist was her own father, and that her father had sneakily got her mother pregnant without anyone knowing. 5. The Delusional Stalker. Between December 21, 2020 and February 18, 2021, Daniel Clark stalked a woman he had become obsessed with. It started when Daniel posted bizarre accusations on Facebook that his victim's parents had abused him as a child. Then he sent her a direct message. Well, more of a direct warning to stop following him on her yellow moped. But seeing as she didn't have a moped, she just tried to ignore it as the ramblings of a crazy person. Then Daniel started sending her pictures of himself naked, and that was when things started getting really weird. He continued to threaten her. He said she was gonna pay big time for what her family had done to him, and he sent her a picture of himself holding a knife. Then Daniel showed up at her house armed with a metal bar and was arrested. After his arrest, the police figured out he was completely delusional and unstable. Daniel had gotten so obsessed with a woman he didn't know that he started making up stories about her parents, then turned his twisted attention on her. And yet, despite this man clearly being dangerous, he was given only 30 days of rehabilitation and slapped with a GPS monitor and a restraining order. His victim, who hasn't been named for safety reasons, is still too afraid to leave her house at night. 4. The Real Dexter. Stephen Miles was just 17 years old when he became obsessed with the TV serial killer Dexter. He became so obsessed that he cut his hair just like the TV character. He started trying to act like him, and then he tried to follow in his fictional footsteps. On January 24, 2014, Stephen attacked his girlfriend of the time, Elizabeth Thomas, and stabbed her to death before dismembering her body. The specific facts of this case are so disturbing, we can't even repeat them all, or your ears might bleed. What we can say is that after he killed his girlfriend, the young politics student used tools that he took from his father to separate her limbs from her body. Then he covered all of it in a plastic sheet like he'd seen done on Dexter. About 1 hour after the murder happened, when Stephen's sister returned home, he told her that his alter ego Ed had forced him to do something bad. He tried to blame the whole thing on a separate personality. There's no doubt that what happened to Elizabeth was tragic and horrific. And to make sure that Stephen could never do something like this again, he was given 25 years in jail. 3. Murder in the attic. Jessica White was 21 years old when she became the victim of a deadly obsession. Her childhood friend, Jordan McClanahan, was obsessed with Jessica and wanted more than anything in his life to date her. This is according to what Jessica's mum told People magazine. Lots of his Facebook pictures were with her. He was always texting Jessica. He always wanted to be around. It was textbook obsession. On May 3rd, 2016, Jordan walked into a police station and confessed that he'd slaughtered Jessica. He then told the Hazel Park police where he'd stashed her. The cops found her body stuffed in an attic crawl space behind a false wall in her own bedroom. As it came out during the trial, Jordan had taken OxyContin and Xanax, gone to Jessica's house, and then lashed out at her for putting him in the friend zone. All he wanted was a date, but Jessica wasn't interested at all. And so, in a drugged frenzy of anger, he strangled Jessica and hid her behind the wall of her own bedroom. In 2017, the judge sentenced Jordan to life in prison, plus 10 years. 2. Matthew Coleman. Matthew Coleman confessed to murdering his own 2 children in August of 2021 after becoming obsessed with QAnon, secret hand signals, and something called serpent DNA. Matthew became convinced there was a secret conspiracy going on against him and that his enemies communicated through hand signals. What really happened is that Matthew became paranoid and insane. He grew fascinated with the Illuminati, and he believed he was slowly seeing the world decode itself like he was Neo in the Matrix. It all started because of internet conspiracy theories. From what he told authorities after his arrest, the more he obsessed over QAnon and supposed government plots, the more paranoid he became. And finally, in early August, Matthew left his home in Santa Barbara, crossed the border to Mexico, and took the lives of his own 2 kids. He did it because he was convinced that they were going to grow into monsters. He thought his wife had serpent DNA and had passed it on to his children. In Matthew's deranged mind, the only way to prevent the spread of corrupted serpent DNA through the masses was by ending his own kids. Otherwise, the whole planet would turn into an alien species, and there would be no real humans left on Earth. Obviously, Matthew Coleman was completely insane. And what's really scary is that he was a relatively normal person until he started digging into internet conspiracies. After just a short time obsessing over the bizarre articles he read online, he completely lost his mind. 1. Rejected. In Florida, a man committed a horrendous murder in the winter of 2021 because he was rejected by a woman who didn't like him. At least she didn't like him in the same way he liked her. The victim is Delphina Pan, and she was only 28 years old when her corpse was discovered in Miami Beach. Delphina had finished her shift at the Kansas Bar and Grill only moments before she died. She was an aspiring designer. She had a bright future ahead of her, and that was all taken away by her co-worker, Agustin Lucas Mariani. He was 8 years younger than her, a bartender who over the course of working with Delphina had developed an unhealthy obsession. After she got off from work, he followed Delphina to her apartment and stabbed her multiple times in the torso. It's all quite sick, and even sicker that instead of running away, Agustin laid down on top of Delphina as she bled to death and closed his eyes. According to sources close to the investigation, Agustin had made multiple attempts at establishing a romantic relationship, but Delphina was never interested. On the night of her death, he tried to force his way into her apartment to have what he described as a chat, and when she refused and he realized there was no chance of them ever being together, he decided to end her life. Thank you for watching. Would you rather find out someone close to you is secretly obsessed with you, or learn a family member has been stalking someone for years? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.